What is going on, everybody? In today's video, we will be breaking down 5 players that I think are tremendous draft values currently on the Sleeper app. These are a couple players that I really think you need to be targeting aggressively at their current ADP, players that could start to move up higher in ADP as the month continues to go on, and just players that I'm seeing on other platforms like Underdog being targeted aggressively by very serious drafters that are out there. So right now, these players on Sleeper, their ADP to me is just out of this world, and I'm smashing the draft button on them whenever I can. So if you guys are new to the channel, this is all we do here all year long: free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join the community on the way in. Other than that, if you have any fantasy football questions, drop them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Without further ado, let's hop right into today's video. All right, first on the list is my guy, Devonte Smith of the Philadelphia Eagles. I cannot believe how late Devonte Smith goes currently on the Sleeper app at an ADP of 46.1. This is a player in underdog drafts that sometimes goes in the second round. I mean, now some of that has to do with people out there wanting to stack him with AJ Brown, but still, I see him go at the end of the second round a ton. I see him go at the beginning of the third round a ton as well. This is a player who's just been a model of consistency in full PPR formats for the past 3 seasons. Was a wide receiver 2 last year, coming in as a wide receiver 19 overall in PPR, and was a wide receiver 1 the season before, coming in as the wide receiver 9 in full PPR. And I talk about this all the time, or I have talked about this plenty throughout this offseason, right? When you break down what Devonta Smith did in 2022 compared to what he did last year, the numbers really aren't that different. And, going into last season, this was a player who commonly went in the second round, into the second round. And now this is a player in full PPR. Mock drafts we're seeing fall back to the fourth round. And once again, the numbers from the past 2 seasons are not that different. Last year, 81 receptions. The season before, 95. Last year, just over 1,060 receiving yards. The season before, just under 1,200. And then 7 touchdowns in each of the previous 2 seasons. He actually had a higher yard per catch at 13.1 last year compared to 12.5 in 2022. So I think a part of this has to do with, like, people believe that Eagles offense just completely fell off last year. And while they did struggle towards the end of the year, obviously, and struggled in the playoffs, they did not struggle in fantasy football. When you look at AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Jalen Hurts, what those guys were able to do throughout that final stretch, even though the team was struggling as a whole and they were losing games, they were all fine in fantasy football, and that's what we care about at the end of the day. I just absolutely cannot believe how late Devonta Smith goes in some mocks right now. The last community subscriber mock draft that I did, I got Devonta Smith at the 4.6 after already drafting Bijan Robinson, Marvin Harrison Jr., who did admittedly fall a little bit further back in that draft, and then James Cook. That's tremendous. If you already have 3 players of that caliber and you get Devonta Smith as your wide receiver 2, absolutely amazing. I don't know if this is going to last, going into the end of August, beginning of September, but for now, continue to draft Devonta Smith at this ADP. He's an absolute smash value. All right, next up is my guy, Christian Kirk. I mean, if you guys have followed the channel the past 2 years, you guys know that I'm a fan of Devonta Smith and Christian Kirk, but they both just have great values where they're being drafted at the moment. And when you look at Christian Kirk, another guy who's just a true model of consistency, right? In full PPR last year, when he was healthy, he was on a tremendous pace. In games that he was healthy in, he only gave you single digits 3 times, double digits every other game. And that was with Calvin Ridley in this offense. So I'm not worried about Brian Thomas Jr. like some people are, thinking he's going to become the wide receiver 1 in this offense. Christian Kirk is the true wide receiver 1 in this offense. Evan Ingram was there last year too. Love Evan Ingram at his current ADP as well. But man, Christian Kirk, I think coming off the injury that he sustained in week 13 last year, just being so slept on when he was a wide receiver 1 in 2022 and was on a great pace last year as well. So I think when you look at things, even if you don't believe in this Jacksonville Jaguars offense going into this coming season, if you think that they're due for more of a slump in comparison to what we saw last year where they missed the playoffs and when Trevor Lawrence was playing hurt throughout the whole season, I don't think it's really going to matter. I think Christian Kirk is still going to be the focal point of this offense, get a ton of targets, get a ton of receptions, and still be that security blanket for Trevor Lawrence. So when he's on the board, I mean, this is another player who's going in the 4th round, a couple of selections after Devonte Smith, but sometimes he falls back to the 5th round. And then every now and then you might even see him go at the beginning of the 6th round. I mean, any of those points in the draft, I'm comfortable with drafting Christian Kirk. Like I said, he's a wide receiver 1 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's what you want to look for when you're in those types of rounds, is what types of wide receiver 1s can I take off the board. This is just a player coming off an injury, similar to Devonte Smith, coming off an offense that struggled down the stretch last year. And for that reason, he's being slightly written off going into the coming season. But I think drafting Christian Kirk at his current ADP is 100% going to pay off. I'm smashing the draft button whenever I can on Christian Kirk. All right, next up on the list, let's talk about a running back in Raheem Mostert of the Miami Dolphins, going at an ADP of 84.9, a player that can go anywhere from the 6th to the 8th round, depending on who you're drafting with. I have seen more fantasy managers start to kind of target Raheem Mostert or warm up to the idea of drafting him, where earlier in the offseason, he was like a for sure 8th round, 7th round selection. But I love Raheem Mostert at his current ADP. Listen, Devon Shane's a new shiny toy, has that high ceiling, all that stuff. I get why you want to draft Devon Shane. If he's healthy this whole season, he has literal RB1 overall in fantasy upside. 100% understand that. But Raheem Mostert is just not going to be cut out of this offense 100%. He had 21 total touchdowns last year. If you go back and look at some of those games where Devon Shane played really well when he was back and healthy at the end of the season, outside of week 17, Raheem Mostert played in all those games too and still had double-digit fantasy performances in all of those games. As a matter of fact, he only had single-digit fantasy performances in PPR twice last year. And everyone talks about that high ceiling for Devon Shane for good reason, scoring 51.3 points in week 3. But everyone seems to forget that Raheem Mostert had 45.2 PPR points in that game as well, and had plenty of other high ceiling games, 34.2 in week 6, 21.4 in week 12, 23 in week 14, 18.3 in week 5. And those last two I mentioned, Devon Shane played in both of those games. So I just don't see any way that Raheem Mostert's completely cut out of this offense. I know he's older at age 32, but I think especially to start the year, Raheem Mostert's going to really remind a lot of people why he's so valuable to this Miami Dolphins offense. He's going to be one of those guys who goes later rounds, and then first couple of weeks, you're going to see him scoring touchdowns. You're going to be like, oh yeah, Raheem Mostert was absolutely great in 2023 fantasy football, and he's still going to be a factor in 2024 fantasy football. I don't think he's going to be a top 5 back necessarily, but at his ADP, he's 100% worth the selection. I think in all formats right now, his ADP is gold. So I'm smashing the draft button on Raheem Mostert whenever he is available. All right, next up, let's talk about Jake Ferguson. I consider talking about Evan Ingram. I wanted to mention one tight end in today's video because there's some really good ADPs for tight ends overall on Sleeper, but I don't want to double dip into the same offense. We already talked about Christian Kirk and, Jake Ferguson going kind of in a similar tier to Evan Ingram right now, has an ADP of 87.8 overall on Sleeper. And you see him getting drafted right next to Evan Ingram on Underdog right now, which once again, I look at those drafts and really consider them the sharpest drafts of this time of year. But he's a little bit further back on Sleeper. You got David Njoku and Brock Bowers in front of him, and then Evan Ingram, who's got an ADP of 67.7. So Fergie's kind of, a couple spots ahead here on Sleeper, and I've seen him fall back as late as the middle of the 9th round in mock drafts right now for redraft purposes. And I think Jake Ferguson's going to be great this year. I still think CD's the guy, obviously. I think Brandon Cooks is actually an okay wide receiver, too. Obviously, those guys are going to get their cut, but I really think Jake Ferguson has to be the next guy up, and he might even be in front of Brandon Cooks in terms of overall targets and receptions. Maybe not overall, but I think that is a possibility. But I think where it's going to be most important is in the red zone. I think Jake Ferguson could actually hit double-digit receiving touchdowns this year. I think he has that type of upside. I really think he could crack into the top 8, top 7, top 6 at the tight end position. Last year, he finished as the tight end 9. So I don't think that's crazy to say, especially if he hits double digits, because when we look at this offensive line for the Cowboys, it was not great last year. I think it's going to be very good this year. And right now, look at this running back room. You got Zeke, Rico Dowdle, and Deuce Vaughn. Like, it's fine. I think those guys will be okay, but they're not going to put this team over the top, and they're not going to be like called on every time this team's in the red zone. And this is still going to be a team that's going to throw the football a lot, right? They're kind of in a weird spot as this Dak's last year. Mike McCarthy, if this team does not make it to the NFC Championship game, he's probably fired. I feel like if they don't make it to the Super Bowl, he's probably fired. It just looks like they're about to completely hit the reset button. I think it's going to be one of those years where Dak is really relying on the tight end. Overall, I just think Jake Ferguson, great upside for where he's being drafted. I think he can easily be a tight end one this year and repeat as a double digit average in terms of fantasy points per game like he had last year at 10.4. So Jake Ferguson, I just think the touchdown upside is there for him. I think the overall upside is there for him. I think he's going to be heavily targeted throughout the year. So if you're grabbing him as your tight end one in the 8th or 9th round for redraft purposes, I think that is fantastic. And like I said, his overall ADP a little bit pushed back on sleeper. Take advantage of that while you can. All right, I know we already talked about 2 wide receivers, but we're going to end the video with a wide receiver that I've talked about a ton throughout this offseason, and that's Christian Watson, whose ADP on sleeper is 101.8. I mean, he's going closer to pick 67, 68, 69 on Underdog, and every now and then gets drafted earlier than that ADP, excuse me. And I know I've talked about Christian Watson a ton this offseason, but going back to that last subscriber mock draft that I referenced earlier, I'd already taken Bijan, MH Jr., James Cook, Devonte Smith, Rashid Rice, Zamir White, and I was still able to get Christian Watson as my wide receiver 4 in the 7th round at 7.7, late in the 7th round. So the amount of upside that you're bringing to your roster with Christian Watson as a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, maybe if you go really aggressive or maybe you're drafting more aggressive because you're building a best ball team on Underdog, whatever it is, I practice for double flex formats because that's what most of the leagues I play in are. So I want 4 wide receivers that I believe in through the first 6th or 7th rounds in my drafts or my mock drafts at this point in the offseason. So getting Christian Watson at an ADP of 101.8, like I'm not afraid to draft him against that ADP on sleeper whatsoever. I just think it's a tremendous ADP. I understand that people are worried about the injuries, all of that. I get it, guys, but we have to kind of look at what if Christian Watson is fully healthy this year. There's a lot of competition for targets still. I get it. People liked Tavon Wicks. Jaden Reed is, obviously coming off a great rookie season. And Romeo Doubs is a player that I think is being way too ignored. I almost chose Romeo Doubs for this video, but I think he's more of an overall sleeper, while more serious drafters are still privy to Christian Watson, right? And I think at the end of the day, with Christian Watson, if he's healthy, he's going to be just fine, right? And I think he's the true wide receiver 1 on this team. Some people think that's crazy, but I truly think he's the wide receiver 1 on this team, the most alpha wide receiver on this team, can make the best overall catches, those big plays. And I think it's just easy to forget how tremendous he was in his rookie season when he was healthy. And I think it's also easy to forget how tremendous he was last year when he was fully healthy. I mean, really look at those last 3 games that he played in from weeks 11 through week 13, 4 touchdowns, a ceiling of 27.6 fantasy points. And he did it against good teams, the Lions and the Chiefs. I mean, these were big games for the Packers. And I think that Jordan Love, coming fresh off of that contract, off of a great season last year. I think a lot of people believe in this Packers offense. I don't need to talk about like why this Packers offense or their passing attack is going to be good, but it is going to be good. I truly believe that, and I don't see why there's any reason to not believe that or to think that like Jordan Love takes a huge step back. So I think whenever Watson's on the field, he's going to be tremendous. And once again, like you're drafting him at such a good ADP on sleeper that you can get him as a wide receiver 4 or 5. So even if he is missing time here and there, it's not going to kill your roster at the end of the day. He becomes such a great value and kind of like a great piece just to add to your roster to kind of take it over the top. If you're getting him in the 7th round, like you're just not spending a tremendous amount of draft capital on him. So I love where he's going right now in sleeper. Not afraid to draft him against his ADP, but I think at 101.8, that is absolute gold. Go ahead and smash that drop button when you are seeing Christian Watson available. And that'll do it for today's video. If you guys did enjoy the content today, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Come join the community. This is all we do all year long. Free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, come join the Catch fam. Other than that, you guys have any fantasy football questions, please drop them down below. Redraft, Dynasty, Best Ball, whatever you guys are most into at the moment. I'll get back to you whenever I can. Be sure to join our free Discord down below as well. That's going to let you guys know when I'm hopping into underdog drafts, when I'm running PPR mock drafts through Sleeper. And on top of that, you guys can get invites to our community drafts for the coming 2024 season, as well as ask whatever fantasy football questions you guys want, post whatever mock drafts you guys want people to join. Do whatever you want. Join the Discord down below. It is free. So with that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on the catch.